I don't have to say anything to kick your butt into gear to use a mantra. If you're being brought down to the mat by caustic self-language, if that's keeping you, or negative self-talk or negative self-image, if that's keeping you from getting what you need in life, for having a balanced, healthy, happy life, there'll be a point where you're going to say, I can't live this way anymore. Coming to a mantra is pretty easy stuff. It's relatively painless compared to living a life of listening to that tape run into your head. Well, I could just turn that off. Well, the way it doesn't just turn off. In order to turn it off, you've got to redirect it. Understandings of mantra that we've had experience with in our American culture, perhaps, or Western culture, is this chanting. We've heard people, oh, they're chanting a mantra, often in another language. It could be Sanskrit or Hindi or something like this. Not unlike reciting a prayer. In reality, saying a rosary for the Catholics is a type of mantra. You're saying these prayers over and over again. Okay, this is sort of a devotional, what we call a devotional use of mantra, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's not really what I'm talking about in this practice, though. It's perfectly fine for its uses, and it's used in these different cultures for different things. The use of mantra here on the path is primarily used the idea of an affirmation. Again, the use of words to create balance. But instead of a prayer or a chant, we're going to look in ourselves as we're assessing ourselves, and if we're finding that negative or caustic self-talk comes up, I'm talking to myself like I'm saying things about myself to myself that I wouldn't say to anyone else or a child. I'm less than, or I'm calling myself names or this type of thing. If those words are taking me out of balance, if those words are causing me pain, mental pain, emotional pain, if they're causing me to act or react in a way that's out of balance, I know that if words brought me out of balance, I can use words to bring me back into balance. And this is where the affirmation comes in, that use of mantra. Mantra is not usually something somebody's going to give you, though, not the way I use it. You're going to create your own mantra. And I guide you through that in this process. We look for, I call process language. If I say to myself, well, I'm not, my self-talk is saying, oh, you're ugly, I'm ugly, I'm ugly, I'm ugly. If I simply turn around and use opposite language, oh, I'm attractive, part of me is not going to buy that. It's going to be hard. It could be effective, but I'm not going to believe myself. So we look for ways to create this process language that's believable, that is a potent antidote to that caustic self-talk. I was working with a lady, she was 85 years old last year, and she was in a wheelchair in a nursing home environment or an assisted living environment, and I was there working with her for breath work and for her stress. And there's a lot of things going on in her life, to include her health, that was causing her stress. But one of her big directions things she was trying to accomplish was to transfer from her wheelchair to her bed. If she could do that effectively on her own, then she could stay at a certain level of assisted living. So I came in and I'm working with her, and I'm kind of helping her with some of that. But I wasn't helping with the physical practice. I was helping her with the mental practice of this effort. She was having troubles making this happen. And I said, well, when you trying to lift yourself out of that chair, do you talk to yourself? She said, oh, yeah. And I said, well, what are you saying? I said, are you talking bad to yourself? Are you criticizing yourself? And she says, oh, yeah. I'm calling myself a failure. I'm calling myself weak. I said, how does it feel when you do that? I feel like a failure and I feel weak, and she's not successful. So I thought, well, this could be a perfect place to leverage a mantra. She came up with the words. I didn't give them to her. And she said, you know what, Doug? I think this will work. Instead of calling myself weak and all these other things, I'm simply going to say to myself, I'm doing the best I can right now. Now I couldn't have come up with anything better. It was not black and white. It wasn't saying anything that she couldn't believe. She eventually was successful in getting from the wheelchair to the bed. And so this is a clear case where she created a mantra as words that were a counter of process words. I'm moving in the direction of kind of words instead of black and white words to that caustic self-talk. It not only brought her into a little more mental balance and less stress, it actually had a physiological energizing effect on her. No, only people who need, people who are weak or sick or something need this kind of thing. It's like, well, when you're sick, do you take medicine? When the body's imbalanced, do you take medicine? Do you change your diet? When you're overweight, do you go exercise? Mantras are not fantasy talk. Mantras are not my use of a mantra, and I really, the most potent use of a mantra, whatever your experiences are, whatever you may have read or had someone else tell you, these are affirmations. These are words that are tailored to your specific caustic words or imbalancing words or thoughts that come up. They're tailored for you. To tell someone, they're in a wheelchair, for instance, and that they're sailing and they're flying and they're free as a bird and all these kinds of things, that's not a mantra. That's a guided visualization or something of that sort. That's not a mantra in the way I use it. It's a very specific, it's a very tight practice where we look at the words that come up, we identify what's behind that, what's behind those words. At first, your caustic self-talk may come up as anger. I'm mad all the time. I hate the world. I hate women. I hate men. And that's always coming up in my head. I need a mantra for that, Doug. Okay. This is where a little bit more work, we can create a mantra for that. Sure, you can. And you might find that it doesn't work. I've been using that mantra, Doug, and it doesn't work. I'm still coming up with them. This language is still coming up. I say, okay, let's look at this. Maybe you need to look at that anger a little deeper. What's behind that anger? Oh, because I can tell you a lot of guys respond with anger when they're really afraid. That's really what the problem is. Fear often results in anger. And it's not just guys. I think there's a lot of women who are in that category too. So we say, well, we leveraged a mantra towards anger and it didn't work. Let's look a little deeper. Let's look a little oh, well, really, I'm really afraid. I'm afraid of whatever. I'm afraid of losing this relationship. I'm afraid of losing my job. I'm afraid of my health situation. Then we say, okay, now let's leverage. We got the real legs under this. Let's leverage a new mantra to that real root cause. Okay, I got a mantra. I think it's going to work. Now, how and when do I use it? Well, first of all, you identify when, under what circumstances, time, place, situation, does that self-talk kind of come to the surface? Usually under times of some pressure or stress. For instance, let's think of the holidays. Sitting around the dinner table with all these relatives. And you could have a possible reaction. You could be the person sitting there looking around at all your relatives and going, oh, I'm the only one here without a job. And there's my uncle and he's a successful, shipbuilder, and I look at my brother and he's an attorney and he's got a beautiful wife. I'm sitting here, I can't even have a girlfriend. I don't have a job. I'm a mess. I'm a loser. I'm a failure. Well, there's a time when that talk's starting to come up. Now, if you have a mantra and you find that that's a talk that normally comes up, well, you can use it right there in the moment of that get-together and say, that talk's coming up. I'm looking around the room and I can feel it coming up and the wheels are spinning, the tape's spinning. I can leverage it then. I can also get even more sophisticated with that. I know I'm coming into this holiday. I know I'm coming into this dinner. I know who's going to be there. I see the storm clouds gathering, the setup situation is presenting, and even before it happens, those words are coming up. I start to get better at and seeing how this situation starts to evolve. I can start leveraging that mantra early. So when days before, a week before, an hour before, I go to the family dinner or whatever it is. So when I go in, I'm going to be a little less reactive. Those words, I'm not guaranteeing they don't come up. They're going to come up with less fury. They're going to come up less often. They're going to be a lot easier to manage as we apply that mantra. The mantra can change over time because your loudest noise can change. We talked about that anger. At first, I tried to have a mantra for my anger, and I realized I need to shift. I need to pivot because the real problem here was fear. So I've shifted and I've created a new mantra for the fear. Well, maybe we took the steam out of that. Now new language is coming up. Now it's a social anxiety. So I look at that and going, oh, is there self-talk coming up? Or am I acting out of thought patterns that would reflect self-talk? I'm acting like I'm less than. I'm acting like I'm a failure or whatever it is. I create a new mantra. As we peel back these different imbalances, if it's words that are bringing you out of balance, we have a way of leveraging words to bring you back into balance. That's the use of mantra primarily in the path process. Authentic use of mantra, potent use of mantra, is not wishful thinking. Okay? It isn't a magic lamp with a genie that's going to come out. It isn't what some people might, say, just wish it and it'll manifest. That's not mantra. Mantra is a tool that we use to bring us back into balance, not to feed into our imbalances. If I'm out of balance, mantra will bring me back to balance. It's not going to, like I said, be that 3 magic wishes or the genie in the lamp that's going to, if I just say it often enough, it'll manifest. I personally don't believe in ask and you'll receive. I personally believe in give and you'll receive. And it's maybe a little divergent here, but this is not simply looking for the universe to hand you something or to manifest your wishes. This is to rewire your brain. That mantra, that caustic self-language wired your brain to think in a pattern. It created a neurological, we call a neural pathway of thinking. When certain stimulus came up, you went into that caustic self-talk pattern of thinking. The mantra is simply using the same neurology, the same principle, to rewire and create a new neural pathway in the brain for another thought pattern. How do I know if I'm using the mantra for right action? How do I know if I'm using it ethically? Can I use it just to rewire my brain to do anything I want? And the answer is no. The nature of this practice is to create balance. What's your intention? I mean, it's no longer a mantra. A mantra by definition is a balancing action. If you're using something you repeat to yourself over and over again to create some false self-image, which people will do, it's not a mantra. It's another thing. It's not in the realm here. A mantra by definition is a balancing use of words in relationship to imbalancing words. It can be used in some scenarios where it may not look like a mantra scenario. For instance, you're at a bar and you are feeling intimidated. There's a beautiful woman or there's a beautiful guy, and you're trying to drum up the courage to say something, to introduce yourself or to make talk, conversation. And all sorts of stuff is coming up, I'm not handsome enough, or I know she just finds out what kind of job I do. It's going to be down the tubes. It's not going to work. So really, let's think about that. What is that talk coming up reflective of? It's reflective of an imbalanced view of yourself. It's caustic self-talk. You are, with that talk, You're in a scenario where you're under a little pressure and your imbalances start to surface. Your lack of self-confidence, your self-judgment, your false expectations of yourself start to come up, and you've created words are starting to come up that reflect those things. They're reflecting those outer parts of yourself, that ego identity parts of yourself. And you're not happy with those. You're not. So you come up. I'm not tall enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm whatever. I'm going to stutter. Or, you know, is my zipper up? All these kinds of things. And yeah, it can create this big anxiety situation. But you have to ask yourself before you jump into a mantra. You're not falsely going to build yourself up to be something you're not. If you have enough presence of mind, what's really behind all this anxiety and self-deprecating talk? And sometimes this is a lot easier to work with when you're not in the heat of the moment. Okay? I'm not saying you can't create a mantra on the fly, but to really work with this effectively, you go into the bar, you see this happening with yourself, you might say, I need to do something about this. And maybe I'll have a couple beers and go home. I don't know. That could be, you say, every time I come into this situation, I chicken out. I go home. I feel even worse. I'll never have a date. I'll never have a girlfriend. And this whole cycle of things happens. So what you do is you come into that situation and highlight an imbalance. Life put you in a situation to highlight your imbalances. Okay, I'm going to go home and work on this. And then you start looking at that talk that comes up every time you get in front of a beautiful woman or a beautiful guy or whatever. And you say, what's going on with that? Where is that coming from? Where is that talk coming from? Where did I come up with the idea that I wasn't handsome enough or beautiful enough? Where did that come from? Did I create that? Or is this something that I've compared myself to other people, or just some paradigm that's cultural, or is it a personal rant or a cultural chant, this type of thing? We want to get behind that caustic self-talk. We want to get behind that less than, I am less than language. Create a mantra when you're not on the firing line, when you have some clarity. Create a mantra that goes after, as best you can, the root cause of that talk, of that self-image. Go back to the bar. Find yourself in a similar situation. If that talk is going to, you've been practicing with your mantra maybe at home. I've been practicing, and I'm not, it's process language. It's real. I can believe it. I'm taking a little different, I have a different perspective on myself. Go into the bar and those feelings are going to start to come up again. Here's another attractive potential mate, and I'm looking to break the ice, and I'm noticing that I've been using that mantra at home, and that doesn't come up. That anxiety isn't quite as intense, and I can write in real time. I can go back with the mantra and say, okay, here it is coming up again. I'm just moving in this direction. Anytime in an affirmation, and this is somewhat my opinion, but it's also from my experience, that when you use not or no, variations of no, in an affirmation, it's like taking a leg off of the chair. It makes it a little less stable, a little weaker, a little more wobbly, because it's not moving you in a direction, it's moving you away from a direction. Does that make sense to you? I'm no longer going to accept abusive behavior. Now, there's nothing wrong with that as an affirmation, but even stronger affirmation could be one that doesn't use negative language. It says, I'm worthy of love and affection and to be treated like a king or a queen. Do you see where that I'm no longer going to be a victim versus I am strong and capable person? Those are two different directions. One's moving me away, one's moving me towards. This is moving me towards the direction I say I want to go. I can use this affirmation without the negative language. I can use this as my compass to move to where I say I want to go. They're saying the same thing, but I've chosen to say, well, I'm just not going to be that anymore. But what are you going to be? I'm not going to accept this anymore. What are you accepting? I'm not accepting that view of myself anymore. What are you accepting as a view of yourself? One could be pulling you out of the fire, but one's not bringing you towards your goals or towards the direction you want to say you want to go. They're not bad. They're not wrong when you use I'm not. They could be a stepping stone to creating a more directional affirmation. Sometimes if you're in a really tough scenario, where there might be abuse, mental, physical abuse, or what have you, the first place to start with that might be a no. Just like we talked about the first step in the pause. The first step of the path is pause. One of the things to do to pause is to say no. I need a mantra to put the brakes on something that's happening. But I'm going to then move from that mantra as quickly as I can to create a new one to tune it up that's going to help me make that pivot, to make that turn. I'm moving away, and I don't want to just keep moving away. I want to turn, I want to pivot, I want to move in the direction I say I want to go. So I may have to gently reformulate. I'm moving away from this, I'm saying no to that, but what am I saying yes to? There's your powerhouse affirmation. When you have negative language like no or not in an affirmation, it is leaving, conceptually, it could be leaving a vacuum. It could feel like you're leaving a vacuum. I'm not going to do this, but I know what I'm against, but what am I for? Well, sometimes we have to understand what we're not going to accept before we understand what we will accept. We have to reformulate a vision of ourselves. That's understandable. We just don't want to leave that no, that negative, as being, okay, I'm done. I've got the mantra. I'm just not going to do this anymore, because that's not moving you forward. It's just moving you away from the fire. It's not taking you where you need to go. If your intention is to create balance, you're not going to hurt yourself. If your mantra isn't perfect, it's okay. Don't sacrifice the good for the perfect. You always will be in a rewrite mode. Something I've learned in the business of writing. I'm in the middle of writing a book, and I was like, yeah, you're going to rewrite it. Get something down. Get something that you can work with. And then as this practice evolves, you'll go back to it and go, now I understand. I've seen some movement, and now some things are a little more clear. I want to go back, and I just want to refine that a little bit, because I may have just had an awareness that I didn't have before. The words might be a little more potent if I said this. Any tool can be used to build or to destroy. In the sense that you could use a frustration in finding a mantra as another way of reinforcing an imbalance. I can't come up with the perfect mantra, so this isn't for me, this practice isn't for me, I'm out of here. Let me just go back to the bar and be miserable. These are practices, which means you've got some guidelines. Get out there and try them. You're okay. You're not going to hurt yourself. Get out there, try them, refine them, come back. Let's look at how did it work for you. Journal how it worked, what didn't work. That's part of the healing process of the path. What worked, what didn't work. If it didn't work, I go back to the path process. I reassess. Oh, maybe I didn't really leverage the mantra to the right thing. Maybe it wasn't anger. Maybe it was fear. Come back to that tool again. See if it works. If it works, then I rehearse it.